Hi, I'm Tessa. I've always been the kind to keep my head down and work hard. It's paid off. I landed a job at a major trading company right out of college and clawed my way up from there. Life was straightforward: work, sleep, and the occasional night out with friends to blow off steam. That routine changed the night I met Lucas. It was at one of those rare outings with friends, a loud party downtown where the music pounds in your chest and you have to shout to be heard. Lucas was different, more reserved, hanging back from the crowd, nursing a beer. He had that look, you know? Like he had a story to tell, but preferred to keep it to himself. We got to talking, or rather, shouting over the noise. Turns out, we both shared a distaste for these kinds of loud parties, which was kind of funny, considering where we were. Lucas was easy to talk to. He had this straightforward way about him that I appreciated right off the bat. Not really my scene, to be honest. He yelled over the music, a small smile playing on his lips. "Then why are you here?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Trying to keep my cousin happy. She dragged me out tonight," he admitted, rolling his eyes slightly. "Sounds like a good brother," I replied, nodding in approval. We ditched the party early, opting for a quieter bar down the street where we could actually hear each other. That night we talked about everything, from our jobs to our taste in movies. Lucas mentioned his previous marriage almost in passing. "It didn't work out. She wasn't faithful," he said simply, his voice flat. "But that's the past." His honesty caught me off guard, but it also made me respect him more. We started seeing each other regularly after that night. Things moved fast, and it wasn't long before we were talking about a future together. After Lucas and I decided to make things official, he was eager to introduce me to his mother, Susan. We planned a Sunday brunch at her place, and I remember feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. I wanted to make a good impression. As we pulled up to her tidy, two-story house, Lucas turned to me with a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, it'll be fine. Just be yourself," he said, squeezing my hand. The moment we stepped inside, I was hit with the smell of bacon and eggs. The house was spotless, every item in its rightful place, which told me she probably spent the better part of the morning cleaning and preparing for this. "Lucas, my boy." Susan's voice rang out from the kitchen, followed by her appearance in the doorway. She wiped her hands on her apron as she approached us. Her gaze landed on me, and it felt like she was trying to x-ray my soul. "And you must be Tessa. Heard a lot about you." "Nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Thompson," I said, extending my hand. She shook it, her grip surprisingly firm. "Call me Susan." Mrs. Thompson was my mother-in-law, and I couldn't stand her. Her blunt statement threw me off, but I laughed it off. "All right, Susan it is." We sat down at the dining table, which was meticulously set with fine china and crystal glasses, an indication of how important this meeting was to her. Susan served us, then took the seat across from me, her eyes never straying far. "So, Tessa," she started, cutting straight to the chase. "Lucas tells me you're quite the career woman." "Trading, is it? Sounds like a man's world." I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a jab. "Yes, it's trading, and it's for anyone who's good at it," I replied, keeping my tone light. Lucas chimed in, perhaps sensing the tension. "Tessa's one of the top traders at her firm. She's really good at what she does." "That so?" Susan's voice carried a note of skepticism. "I hope you know, Lucas needs someone who's present, not stuck at the office all hours." I felt my cheeks warm up, but I kept my cool. I manage my time well. Lucas and I have plenty of quality time together. Susan hummed, poking at her food. "We'll see." I remember Lucas's ex was always busy too, until she was busy with someone else. Lucas's fork clattered against his plate. "Mom, that's enough." "Oh, relax. I'm just making conversation," Susan said, waving a dismissive hand. She then turned her attention back to me. "Tell me, Tessa, do you cook? Or should my son expect takeout every night?" "I love to cook," I said, forcing a smile. Lucas can vouch for my lasagna. Lucas nodded vigorously. It's true. She makes a mean lasagna. Well, isn't that something? Susan's tone softened a fraction. Maybe you'll have to make it for me one of these days. The rest of the meal passed with small talk about the weather and Susan's garden, which she seemed more passionate about. Every now and then, she'd throw in a pointed question or comment, testing my responses. It was like a verbal sparring match, and I was determined not to let my guard down. As we were leaving, Susan pulled me aside. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but her words cut through the air. Listen, Tessa. My son's happiness is everything to me. I'll do whatever it takes to protect him. Remember that. I met her gaze, my voice steady. I have no intention of hurting Lucas. You have nothing to worry about. Susan studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. We'll see, won't we? After the brunch with Susan, I thought maybe things would settle down, but I was way off. Lucas's work required him to travel a lot, which meant I was home alone often. Susan saw this as her chance to really crank up her watch over me. It started with unexpected visits. The first time it happened, I was working from my home office when I heard the doorbell. I opened the door to find Susan standing there, her face set in a stern expression that didn't promise anything good. Tessa, just in the neighborhood, she said, brushing past me into the house as if it was her own. Thought I'd drop by. I masked my annoyance with a tight smile. Nice to see you, Susan. What brings you here? Oh, just making sure everything's alright here while my son's away, she said, already wandering into the living room, eyeing everything critically. Her visits became more frequent, and each time, Susan had something to say about how I kept the house. It was like living under a microscope. One day, she walked into the kitchen while I was prepping dinner and started rifling through my pantry. Just seeing what you feed my son when he's home. You know processed foods are no good, right? She commented, holding up a box of pasta like it was evidence in a trial. But it didn't stop at home visits. I started noticing Susan around places I frequented, the grocery store, the gym, even the cafe near my work. It was getting creepy. One afternoon, I confronted her. She was, coincidentally, at the same grocery store as me, pushing her cart down the aisle I was in. Susan, this is the third time this week I've run into you like this. What's going on? She played innocent, a sly smile tugging at her lips. What, can't a woman do her shopping? Not at the exact same places and exact same times as her daughter-in-law, consistently. What are you trying to do, Susan? Her smile faded, and she leaned closer, her voice low and harsh. I'm keeping my eyes open, Tessa. You can play the perfect wife all you want, but I know about your desire to cheat on my son. Every encounter left me more frustrated and angry. It wasn't just the invasion of my privacy, it was the constant tension, the expectation of having to defend myself against imaginary accusations. Over time, Susan's eyesight had gotten worse, something about her age and her health stacking the odds against her. The doctor had given her glasses, but she hated them. Said they made her feel old and irritated her nose. She'd put them on and take them off, fussing and fuming, and more often than not, she'd just leave them somewhere and forget. Because of that, she saw very poorly, which only added fuel to her naturally suspicious nature. With Lucas away on another one of his frequent business trips, I had grown accustomed to handling things on my own, including dealing with Susan's relentless scrutiny. One evening, feeling a bit cooped up and in need of a change of scenery, I made plans to meet my brother, Jake, for dinner. It was a casual meet-up, nothing fancy, just a chance to catch up with family and unwind. I chose a little outdoor restaurant with a nice terrace that wasn't too far from where I worked. Jake arrived first, and I spotted him at a table, waving me over with a big grin. Hey, sis, he called out as I approached. His face was all bright and cheerful, the typical big brother ready to tease or share a joke. Hey, Jake. It's been too long, I said, giving him a quick hug before sitting down across from him. We ordered some food and drinks, and the conversation flowed easily, as it always did with Jake. We talked about work, family, and some of the latest movies we'd both seen. It was nice, relaxing, and exactly what I needed. As the evening wore on, we wrapped things up. Outside the restaurant, we stood up to say goodbye. I gave Jake a friendly hug, just a normal sister-brother moment. When I got home later that night, the house was dark and quiet. But as I turned on the light in the living room, I nearly jumped out of my skin. There was Susan, sitting on my couch, a smug look plastered across her face, and holding what looked like a digital camera. "What the hell, Susan? What are you doing in my house at this hour?" My voice was a mix of anger and shock. She rose from the couch, holding up the camera. "Gotcha," she said, her voice dripping with a venomous triumph. "Got what, exactly?" I snapped, my patience thinning rapidly. "This." She thrust the camera in my face, showing a photo of Jake and me hugging. "Caught you red-handed with your lover." I rolled my eyes, tossing my keys on the table. "I was with my brother, Jake. We had dinner. That's it." Susan snorted, a harsh, mocking sound that made my hands clench into fists at my sides. "Sure, your brother. I know what I saw." "Oh, really? And what did you see with those failing eyes of yours?" I snapped back, my patience at its breaking point. Her face flushed with anger, and she fumbled with the camera, finally shoving it in my direction. "See for yourself." I took the camera, half expecting some blurry photo taken from a distance, but there it was, a clear shot of Jake and me, mid-hug, smiling. Just a brother and sister enjoying a nice evening out. I couldn't help but laugh, which only seemed to infuriate her more. "What's so funny?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Here, look." I handed the camera back to her. "Put on your glasses, Susan. It's just me and Jake." For a moment, she hesitated, then, muttering under her breath, she dug in her purse and pulled out her glasses. Slipping them on, she looked at the photo again. I watched her face change as she finally saw what was really there. "Now, I think it's time you left," I said firmly, my own resolve hardening. Susan looked like she wanted to argue more, but then she just nodded stiffly and headed for the door. "This isn't over," she muttered as she left. The few weeks Lucas was home felt like a dream. We were inseparable, catching up on lost time, and for a brief period, I could almost forget about the constant cloud of tension that was his mother, Susan. But like all good things, it came to an end too quickly. Soon enough, Lucas was packing his bags again for another extended business trip. I braced myself for the usual loneliness that accompanied his departures, but this time a new complication arose. Susan decided to move in. She showed up at our doorstep one afternoon, suitcase in tow, announcing her stay as if it were the most natural decision in the world. "It's for the good of the family, Tessa. I'm here to make sure you don't get into any trouble," she declared, pushing past me into the living room. I called Lucas immediately, my voice shaking with frustration. "She can't just move in here, Lucas. You need to talk to her." Lucas sighed on the other end of the line. "Tessa, please, just try to get along. I don't want to fight with her about this. It's only for a few weeks." Reluctantly, I agreed, but hanging up the phone, I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. This wasn't going to be easy. Susan wasted no time taking over the household. That first weekend, she followed me around, critiquing every little thing I did. "You're folding those towels all wrong," she'd say, or, "You missed a spot there, do it again." She even took over the kitchen, her worst idea yet. Due to her deteriorating eyesight, she constantly oversalted or overpeppered everything, but whenever the food turned out barely edible, she blamed me. "You must have distracted me," she'd snap, or, "You're trying to sabotage my cooking." During the weekdays, her behavior grew even more suffocating. She sat in the living room, a notebook in her lap, jotting down the times I left for work and came home. Any time I was delayed, even by traffic, she'd greet me with a sneer. "Late again, Busy day or busy boyfriend?" "It was traffic, Susan. Like it is for millions of people every day," I'd retort, my patience fraying at the edges. Her insinuations were relentless, and each day ended with me locking myself in the bedroom, fuming but helpless. Lucas's request echoed in my mind, keeping me from unleashing the torrent of anger I felt. A month into Susan's invasive stay at our house, I finally got the news I'd been waiting for, a promotion at work. This wasn't just any promotion. It came with the opportunity for training at our company's main branch in another city. I'd been eyeing this chance for years, a real step up in my career. When I told Lucas over the phone, his excitement for me was palpable, even through the distance. "That's incredible, babe. I'm so proud of you," he enthused. "Don't worry about the time apart. It'll fly by, and we'll be back together before you know it." Despite the distance and the issues with his mother, his support was unwavering. It bolstered my spirits, filled me with warmth and determination. But then there was Susan. I broke the news to her one evening, trying to keep the conversation light and straightforward. "Susan, I've been promoted. I'll need to go to another city for a while to train," I explained, hoping to sound as nonchalant as possible. Her reaction was as expected, sour and accusatory. "So, you're running off to another city now? What's really there, Tessa? A lover?" she spat, her words dripping with venom. I sighed, frustration bubbling inside. "It's for training, Susan. There's no lover." "Why is that so hard for you to believe?" She snorted, her expression twisted in disbelief. "Sure, training. Just convenient timing, isn't it? As soon as Lucas is gone, you find a reason to leave too." I shook my head, unable to hide my irritation. "Believe what you want, Susan. I'm going, and that's final." With Lucas's blessing ringing in my ears, I packed my bags that night, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere of my own home. Susan's persistent mistrust and conspiracy theories had drained me, and the idea of a few weeks away felt like a breath of fresh air. Once I settled into my temporary apartment in the new city, the sense of freedom was palpable. No Susan lurking around every corner, no insinuations or bitter comments at every turn. I was doing well in training, making new connections, and actually enjoying my evenings in peace. I found myself thinking, more than once, how pleasant life was without Susan watching my every move. But then, one ordinary afternoon as I returned from a session, my phone pinged with a new voice message from Susan. The content of that message turned my newfound peace upside down. "Tessa, I hope you're enjoying your time with your lovers, because you won't have a home to come back to. I've taken care of everything. The house is sold. Stay where you are, for all I care." Her voice, cold and triumphant, sent chills down my spine. I replayed the message, my mind racing. It couldn't be true. Lucas hadn't mentioned anything, and he owned the house, nothing could be done without his signature. Yet, the malicious glee in Susan's voice couldn't be ignored. What had she done? I called Lucas immediately, panic edging my voice, but the call went straight to voicemail. With him still on his business trip and likely in meetings or on a flight, I felt helpless, stuck in another city, the seeds of doubt Susan had planted now sprouting relentless anxiety. As the days passed with no return call from Lucas, my mind conjured up all sorts of disastrous scenarios. Had Susan forged his signature? Was it even legally possible to sell the house like that? The questions tormented me, gnawing at my focus and sleep. Despite the turmoil, I forced myself to continue with the training. I had worked too hard to let Susan's potentially empty threats derail my progress here. By the end of the training program, I was mentally exhausted, not just from the courses, but from the emotional roller coaster Susan had sent me on. I walked into the house, my mind still reeling from the chaos of the past few weeks. There, in the middle of the living room, stood Susan, squinting at me as if she couldn't quite make out who I was. She wasn't wearing her glasses again, which explained the unsure look on her face. But as I got closer, her expression shifted to one of smug triumph. "Welcome back, Tessa," she said, her voice dripping with a venomous cheerfulness. "I have some news for you." I dropped my bag by the door, bracing myself. "What now, Susan?" She thrust a stack of papers at me. Here, read this. It's all settled. The house has been sold. You don't belong here anymore, or in this family for that matter. Her words were cold, calculated. Her claim was so outrageous that for a moment, I was too shocked to speak. What are you talking about? Lucas would never agree to sell our house without discussing it with me first. Oh, but he did. And he's tired, Tessa. Tired of your endless affairs, she added, a harsh edge to her voice. I snatched the papers from her hands, my heart pounding as I flipped through them. My eyes scanned the document quickly at first, then more carefully as something caught my attention. A laugh escaped my lips, not from amusement but from sheer disbelief. Susan looked at me, puzzled and clearly irritated. What's so funny? Here, I said, pushing the papers back into her hands. Put on your glasses and read it aloud. Read what you've signed. Reluctantly, she fumbled for her glasses, put them on, and started reading. This agreement, made and entered into this day by and between. Her voice faltered as she continued, the realization dawning slowly. This isn't a sale contract. It's a loan agreement for consulting services? Yes, Susan. That's right. You didn't sell the house. You signed up for a high-interest loan from some scam artists who took advantage of you. Susan's face went pale, her hands trembling as she held the document. But I thought I was selling the house. There was an ad in the paper, and the man was so convincing. He said it could all be done without bothering Lucas with the details, that it was better this way. You thought you'd sell my house out from under me? Without even a real check on what you were signing? I was incredulous, anger and disbelief warring within me. Tears started streaming down her face, her earlier composure crumbling. I just wanted to protect my son from you and your infidelities. I didn't mean for this to happen. I forgot my glasses, and everything seemed so legitimate. I stared at her, the weight of everything she'd put me through bearing down on me. Susan, you have gone too far this time. You need to leave. Now. With a heavy heart but a clear resolve, I watched as Susan packed a few belongings into her bag, still sobbing, still muttering apologies. As she walked out the door, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. When Lucas returned from his business trip, I had a lot to tell him. As soon as he put down his bags, I started to unload everything that had happened, from Susan's attempted deception to the fake documents. He listened, his face growing tighter and more serious with every detail I shared. After I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, just staring at the ground. Then, he looked up, his jaw set. This is unbelievable. It's time we taught Mom a serious lesson. What she planned to do was way out of line, he said, his voice firm and angry. However, the next day, after a tearful confrontation with Susan, where she pleaded ignorance and desperation, Lucas decided we needed legal advice. We consulted a lawyer to understand the full implications of what Susan had done. The lawyer was pretty clear. From a legal standpoint, your mother-in-law voluntarily took out that loan and signed the contract. She's liable for the repayment, he explained in a no-nonsense tone. Susan's face when she heard that news was something I could never forget. She had thought she could manipulate her way out of the situation, but reality hit hard. She was on the hook for a significant amount of money, and there was no easy way out. She had to find a job, and fast. Within weeks, she started working 2 shifts, just to make ends meet. With Susan now occupied and no longer having time to meddle in our lives, Lucas and I finally found some peace. We decided it was a good time to take a break, to give ourselves a chance to heal and bond again after the chaos. We went to Hawaii for a second honeymoon, and it was blissful. We talked a lot about our future during those long, leisurely walks along the beach. I think we're ready to think about having a baby, don't you? Lucas said one evening, the sunset casting warm glows on his face. I smiled, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. Yes, I do. Let's enjoy being us for a bit longer, and then let's go for it. Sounds perfect, he replied, kissing me gently. Now, back from Hawaii, life feels lighter, simpler. We spend our weekends planning the garden, redecorating the house, just enjoying each other's company. Lucas supports me in everything, including my career and our future family plans. We've discussed timelines, how we're going to manage our work-life balance, and how excited we are to be parents. It's a new chapter for us, one that's filled with hope and looking forward.